Let me tell you a story about a war. It's not a war fought with bombs or bullets, but with batteries and sliding doors and a $12,000 price tag. That price tag just sent shockwaves through the most closed-off automotive market on planet Earth. You've probably never heard of the BYD RACCO, but after the next 12 minutes, you're going to understand exactly why this tiny Japanese microcar is the most terrifying thing the global auto industry has seen in decades. And here's the twist that makes this whole story absolutely electric. It's not even about the car. It's about the playbook. It's about a Chinese company that decided to invade Japan's most sacred automotive space by building a car that's more Japanese than the Japanese themselves. They didn't bring a battering ram to the fortress gates. They built a key, and that key just unlocked a door that's been sealed shut for over 60 years. Now, before we go any further, I need you to understand what a K-car is and why it matters so much to the Japanese psyche. Imagine if 40% of all cars sold in America were the same size as a smart car. Imagine if Ford and GM and Chrysler had spent decades perfecting the art of building tiny, boxy, ridiculously practical little runabouts that easily fit into parking spaces the size of a coffin. That's Japan. The K-car is Japan's automotive soul. It's the vehicle that drives through narrow alleyways in Tokyo, navigates mountain roads in the countryside, and fits into the microscopic parking spots that define Japanese urban living. The segment is worth tens of billions of dollars annually, and for over 60 years it has been the exclusive playground of Japanese domestic brands. Suzuki, Daihatsu, Honda, Nissan, and Toyota have traded the #1 spot back and forth like a hot potato. But they have never, not once, allowed a foreign manufacturer to gain any meaningful traction. It's the last bastion of Japanese automotive exceptionalism. It's the fortress that everyone assumed was impregnable, and then came BYD. On the 28th of July, 2026, BYD officially launched the RACCO in Japan. But let me make this really clear from the start. This wasn't a Chinese car shipped over and converted to right-hand drive. This was a Japanese car built by a Chinese company. The dimensions are the first clue. Japanese law dictates that a K-car cannot exceed 3,400 millimeters in length and 1,480 millimeters in width. BYD built the RACCO at 3,395 millimeters long and 1,475 millimeters wide. That is exactly 5 millimeters shorter and 5 millimeters narrower than the legal limit. 5 millimeters is the width of a pencil. They calculated every single fraction of an inch to maximize interior space while staying completely compliant with the law. They didn't just follow the rules. They hugged the rules so tightly that the rules are practically in a committed relationship with them. The height comes in at 1,800 millimeters, which perfectly matches the super height wagon silhouette that dominates Japanese streets. If you've ever been to Tokyo, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those tall, boxy little vans that look like toasters on wheels, the Honda N-Box and the Daihatsu Tanto, they're everywhere. The RACCO looks like it belongs in that family. It looks like it was born there. And that is the entire point. But the design isn't just about dimensions, it's about every single detail. The RACCO has a right-hand drive configuration, because that's what Japan uses. The gear selector is mounted on the steering column like a minivan, because that's what Japanese drivers expect. The side mirrors fold in automatically to navigate those narrow streets. The doors are power sliding on both sides, which is a game changer in a country where parking spaces are so tight. A regular hinged door would just bang into the car next to you. Japan is a culture that values harmony, that values not inconveniencing your neighbor. A sliding door that requires zero lateral clearance isn't just a luxury feature, it's a social survival tool. BYD didn't just study Japanese regulations, they studied Japanese culture, they studied Japanese parking lots. They studied Japanese families and how they load their groceries and their children into the car. This is not a company that's winging it. This is a company that did the homework. The price is the other half of this equation. The entry-level RACCO 200 starts at 2,145,000 yen, which translates to roughly $11,900 before taxes and subsidies. After the Japanese government kicks in their 15th Ascendian CEV subsidy, the real price drops to about $12,200. Now, to put that in perspective for an American audience, think about what $12,000 buys you in the US market. It buys you a used Honda Civic with 100,000 miles on it. It buys you a base model Nissan Versa that has manual windows and a sound system from 2010. It does not buy you a brand new electric vehicle with a 10-inch screen, heated seats, and power sliding doors. But in Japan, the RACCO is undercutting the Nissan Sakura, currently the best-selling electric K-car, by roughly 20%. The Sakura starts at about 244,000 yen. That's a difference of almost 19,000 yen, which is about $1,500. And here's where it gets even more embarrassing for the competition. The RACCO also beats the Sakura on range. The entry-level RACCO gets 210 kilometers on a single charge. The high-trim RACCO gets 320 kilometers. The Sakura gets 180 kilometers. So BYD is offering a car that costs less, goes further, and has more features. That's not a competitive advantage, that's a mugging. The man behind this operation is a guy named Hiroyuki Tagawa. And this is where the story gets genuinely personal and, honestly, a little bit cinematic. Tagawa spent almost 30 years at Nissan. He was one of the senior engineers who developed the Nissan Days, which is Japan's national people's car. He was also deeply involved in the creation of the Nissan Sakura, the very car that the RACCO is now trying to destroy. He left Nissan in 2025, joined BYD, and immediately began working on a car competing with his former employer's flagship product. You cannot write a better plot twist than that. This isn't just business, this is personal. Tagawa took everything he learned in 30 years at Nissan, everything about how Japanese consumers think, how they drive, what they value, and he weaponized it against the company that trained him. It's like if LeBron James had spent his entire career in Cleveland, then joined the Golden State Warriors, and designed the playbook to beat the Cavaliers in the finals. It's that level of narrative juice. And BYD knows exactly what they have in him. He's not just an engineer, he's a statement. He's a walking, talking advertisement that says, the best Japanese talent is leaving Japanese companies to work for us. Now let's talk about the battery, because this is the technical part that makes American tech nerds absolutely lose their minds. The RACCO uses BYD's Blade battery, which is a lithium iron phosphate chemistry that is inherently safer and more thermally stable than the nickel cobalt manganese batteries most Western automakers use. The Blade gets its name from the physical design of the cells, which are long, thin, and flat, like blades. They're packed together in a honeycomb structure that maximizes energy density while minimizing wasted space. The low-trim RACCO gets a 22.4 kWh Blade battery. The high-trim gets a 35.84 kWh Blade battery. And the high-trim delivers 320 kilometers of WLTC range, which makes it the first K car in Japan to break the 300-kilometer barrier. Nissan has been selling the Sakura for 4 years. They've never cracked 300 kilometers. BYD just did it on their first try. But the real party trick is the safety. BYD loves to show this video where they drive a steel nail straight through a Blade battery cell while it's fully charged. In a standard lithium-ion battery, this causes a catastrophic short circuit, a thermal runaway, and a spectacular fire that's almost impossible to put out. In the Blade battery, the temperature rises to about 60 degrees Celsius, which is hot but not dangerous, and then it just stops. No fire, no explosion, no drama, it just sits there and refuses to burn. That's a huge deal in Japan, a country that gets hit by earthquakes and typhoons regularly. If you're in a car accident during a natural disaster, you really don't want your battery to catch fire. BYD can legitimately claim they have the safest battery in the segment, and they've got the video evidence to back it up. The charging capabilities are also impressive for a car in this price bracket. The RACCO supports 50 kilowatt DC fast charging, which means you can go from 20% to 80% in about 35 minutes. More importantly, the car has V2L and V2H functionality, which means vehicle-to-load and vehicle-to-home. In plain English, you can plug your house into your car and use the car's battery as a backup generator. In a country where power outages are a real and recurring threat, this isn't a gimmick. It's a survival feature. You can keep your refrigerator running, your lights on, and your phone charged for days after a typhoon or an earthquake. That is a massive selling point for Japanese families who take disaster preparedness extremely seriously. BYD didn't just build a car, they built a lifeline. Now let's look at the competitive landscape and see how BYD is stacking up against the established players. The Nissan Sakura is the market leader, but it's getting old. It launched in 2022, and it's been coasting on brand loyalty ever since. The Mitsubishi EKX EV is basically the same car with a different badge because Nissan and Mitsubishi share the platform. The Honda Nun E has better range than the Sakura, about 295 kilometers, but it's also significantly more expensive, starting at roughly 269.9 thousand yen, which is almost 55,000 yen more than the RACCO. The Suzuki EWX is still a concept, it looks promising, but it's not on the road yet, and Suzuki hasn't announced a final price. Toyota has an electric commercial van called the Pixis van, but it's aimed at delivery drivers, not families, and it costs about 314.6 thousand yen, with only 257 kilometers of range. So the RACCO is entering a market where the competition is either overpriced, underperforming, or still in the concept phase. BYD has the perfect product at the perfect moment, but here's the problem. The Japanese government really doesn't want them to succeed. This is where the story gets dark, and this is the part that should make every American watching this feel a little bit uncomfortable. Japan's EV subsidy system is not neutral. It is explicitly designed to favor domestic batteries. For the fiscal year of 2026, the CEV subsidy is calculated based on three factors: the base amount, a model bonus, and a manufacturer bonus. The manufacturer bonus for Toyota, Honda, Nissan, and even Tesla is about 400,000 yen. The manufacturer bonus for BYD is 100,000 yen. That is a fortune disadvantage right out of the gate. But it gets worse. The national purchase subsidy for pure EVs was raised to 1.3 million yen in 2026. The Toyota BZ4X, which uses a battery manufactured in Japan, qualifies for the full 1.3 million yen. The BYD RACCO, because it uses Chinese-made blade batteries, qualifies for about 150,000 yen. That's less than 1/8 of what Toyota gets. When you add Tokyo's local ZEV subsidies, the gap becomes a chasm. A Toyota buyer can get up to 1.9 million yen in total subsidies, which is roughly $82,000. A BYD buyer gets around 450,000 yen, which is about $19,500. That is a 4.2 times difference in government support. Let me repeat that. The Japanese government is giving Japanese EV buyers 4 times as much money to buy a Toyota as it is to buy a BYD. The BYD Japan CEO, Atsuki Tofukuji, publicly said that the new subsidy policy puts BYD at an overwhelming disadvantage. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, under these conditions, we cannot compete fairly. Now, here's the important part. When I tell you this, I don't want you to feel sorry for BYD. I don't want you to see them as the victim. They are not crying about unfair trade practices. They are not complaining about the system. They are looking at a fortune subsidy gap. They're looking at a dealer network that's own a 50th the size of Suzuki's. They're looking at a culture that has historically rejected foreign brands, and they are launching this car anyway. They are pricing it aggressively anyway. They are absorbing the cost and trusting the product to be so good that consumers will buy it even without the government's help. This isn't a plea for mercy. This is a flex. This is BYD saying you can rig the rules, you can subsidize your local heroes, you can put up all the barriers you want, and we are still coming in at a better price with a better car. That is the mindset of a conqueror. That is the energy that makes this story so compelling. The cultural response in Japan has been absolutely volcanic. And this is where the controversy really kicks in. BYD hired Alice Hirose to be the face of the RACCO advertising campaign. Alice Hirose is a massive Japanese actress, a household name, a national treasure of sorts. Her sister, Suzu Hirose, is also a massive Japanese actress, and she happens to be the face of the Suzuki Wagon R, which is arguably the most popular K car in Japan. BYD knew exactly what they were doing. They pitted sister against sister, brand against brand, in the most public, most dramatic, most brilliant marketing move of the decade. When the commercial aired, the Japanese internet exploded. Alice Hirose was bombarded with hate comments. People called her unpatriotic. They called her a sellout. They called her a traitor. They accused her of helping a Chinese company destroy Japanese industry. They attacked her for wearing the color red in the commercial, associating it with the Chinese flag. It was vicious, it was personal, and it was absolutely the best thing that could have happened to BYD. Because before that commercial, the average Japanese consumer wasn't thinking about Chinese cars. Chinese cars were just background noise, something that happened in other countries. But after the hate campaign, everyone was talking about BYD. Suddenly, people who had never considered a Chinese car were looking up the RACCO's specs to see what the fuss was about. They were arguing about the price, the sliding doors, the battery range. They were comparing it to the Sakura and the Nun. The debate shifted from who is BYD to is BYD actually better? That is a massive leap forward in brand awareness. The critics were furious, but you know who wasn't? The head of Japan's K-Car Association, a guy named Shunichi Akama, he made a public statement welcoming the RACCO into the market. He said that BYD's participation validates the K-Car segment and will push Japanese manufacturers to innovate. Imagine the head of the American Automotive Trade Association publicly welcoming a Chinese competitor. It would never happen. The fact that it happened in Japan, in the most protected automotive market on Earth, is a seismic shift. It means the Japanese establishment is starting to acknowledge that the fortress has a crack. They're starting to realize that competition is coming, whether they like it or not. But let's talk about the real practical challenge, because it's easy to build a great car, but it's incredibly difficult to sell it without dealerships. BYD currently has 77 sales locations in Japan. Suzuki has 5,000. That is not a typo. 5,000 versus 77. It's a ratio of 65-1. If you're a Japanese consumer living in rural Hokkaido, you might have to drive 2 or 3 hours to find the nearest BYD dealer. That's a massive handicap. But BYD is expanding at a breakneck pace. They're targeting 100 dealerships by the end of 2026, and they've already secured a secret weapon that nobody saw coming. Yansei is a Japanese institution, a legendary luxury importer that has been bringing in Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and Mercedes-Benzes for over 100 years. They are the gold standard of high-end dealerships in Japan. In November of 2025, Yanase announced they would start selling BYD vehicles. They created a new subsidiary called Yanase EV Square in Tokyo to do it. And in July of 2026, they opened a dedicated BYD store in Yokohama. The president of Yanase, Morita Kusuke, explicitly stated that BYD has the world's top performance and is the perfect partner for the Japanese EV era. When the most prestigious luxury dealership network in Japan decides to put its reputation behind a Chinese brand, that signals to conservative Japanese buyers that BYD isn't a cheap gimmick. It's a legitimate player. It's the ultimate seal of approval. Now let's zoom out and look at the broader Japanese EV market, because it's bizarre and fascinating. Japan is the only major developed market where electric vehicles are failing to take off. In the first half of 2026, passenger EV sales in Japan hit about 59,000 units, which was a 100% increase from the previous year. That pushed the EV penetration rate to 3.5%, which is the highest it's ever been in Japan. But compare that to China, which is at 33%, or Europe, which is at 20 to 25%. And Japan is a laggard by a massive margin. The infrastructure is limited, the electricity grid is strained, and culturally, the Japanese consumer loves hybrids. They love the Toyota Prius. They love the K-car with its tiny gas engine. They are deeply skeptical of full battery power. The Japanese government has been trying to accelerate adoption by throwing money at subsidies, even if those subsidies are biased toward domestic manufacturers. Tesla benefited massively from this. Starting in January of 2026, Japan increased the subsidy cap to 1.3 million yen. And because Tesla uses a certain level of Japanese components, they qualified for a huge chunk of it. Tesla sold about 5,100 cars in the first quarter of 2026, up 140% from the previous year. So BYD is not just fighting against subsidized Japanese EVs. They're also fighting against a surging Tesla, which has the brand cachet and the Elon Musk hype machine behind it. The competitive pressure is enormous. But BYD's trajectory in Japan, despite all these headwinds, is actually pretty impressive. In 2025, BYD sold about 3,870 cars in Japan, which was a 62% increase from the previous year. In the first quarter of 2026, their growth rate was over 100% year over year. In March of 2026 alone, they delivered 625 units, which was nearly double the volume from the previous March. And this was all before the RACCO existed. They were doing this with larger SUVs and sedans that are frankly too big for Japanese roads. The RACCO is the car that finally fits the puzzle. Their goal is to secure 10,000 orders for the RACCO by the end of 2026. To put that in perspective, the Nissan Sequoia sold about 50,000 units over a period of several years. 10,000 units in 6 months would make the RACCO an instant hit. It would be more than BYD has sold cumulatively in Japan since they entered the market in 2023. It's an aggressive target, but it shows they understand the game they're playing. The supply chain integration is the hidden weapon that makes this entire strategy possible. BYD claims that about 90% of the RACCO's components are produced in-house. They make the batteries, they make the motors, they make the chips, they make the screens. They make the sliding door mechanisms, they assemble the car. When you control 90% of the supply chain, you can cut costs in ways that Honda and Nissan simply cannot match. Japanese automakers have traditionally relied on a tiered supplier network, which has been efficient but also expensive and fragmented. BYD's everything under one roof approach means they can shave off profit margins on individual components, because they are making money on the entire ecosystem. This is why they can afford to launch a car at a loss and use it as a loss leader to buy brand awareness. They are not betting on the RACCO to be profitable in the short term. They are betting that the RACCO will bring Japanese customers into the showroom. And those customers will see the rest of the lineup, and they will trust the brand for the next 10 or 20 years. It is a long-term occupancy strategy, not a short-term profit raid. Now, here's the part where I want to bring this back to America, because I know that's what you're thinking. You're sitting there in your apartment or your house watching this video, and you're wondering, why does any of this matter to me? Here's why. Japan is the testing ground for a global strategy. If BYD can win in Japan with its fussy consumers, its hostile subsidy environment, and its intense cultural nationalism, then the rest of the world is sitting ducks. The playbook they're writing in Tokyo can be copied and pasted into any other right-hand drive market. It can be adapted for Europe, and eventually, it will be scaled up for the United States. They are learning how to localize, how to deal with regulatory pushback, and how to win the cultural war. The RACCO may never touch American soil. It's too small, too niche. And frankly, Americans don't buy cars that size. But the lessons learned from building it will be applied to the cars that BYD eventually does bring to the US market. They're already building factories in Mexico. They're already expanding in South America. They're already setting up supply chains that can circumvent tariffs. The RACCO is a rehearsal. It's a dress rehearsal for the global takeover of the automotive industry. And let's be honest about something that a lot of people don't want to say out loud. The reason BYD is locked out of the US market right now is tariffs and politics. The chicken tax, the 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs, the political rhetoric about national security. It's all designed to keep them out. But politics change, tariffs come and go, elections happen. And when the political winds shift, BYD will be ready with a car tailored for the American market. Just as they were ready with a car for Japan. They have the technology, they have the supply chain, and they have the ambition. The only thing standing between BYD and the American consumer is a few politicians and a few trade barriers. And trade barriers have a funny way of disappearing when the economic incentives are strong enough. There's another layer to this story that's worth exploring, and it's the psychological battle. Japanese consumers have been conditioned to believe that domestic products are superior. It's not just about cars, it's about rice, it's about electronics, it's about everything. The concept of Galapagos syndrome is often used to describe Japan's isolated development of technology that is incompatible with the rest of the world. K-cars are the purest expression of that syndrome. They are designed for Japanese roads, Japanese parking spaces, and Japanese taxes. When a foreign company tries to build one, they usually fail because they don't understand the nuance. They build something that looks like a K-car but drives like an American hatchback. BYD avoided this trap entirely. They didn't just hire a Japanese engineer to consult. They hired the Japanese engineer who defined the segment. They didn't just look at the road regulations. They built the car to max out every single number. They didn't just offer a sliding door. They made it standard with a foot sensor. They studied the Japanese housewife, the Japanese salaryman, the Japanese grandmother, and they built a car that appeals to every single one of them. The advertising controversy with Alice Hirose proves that no matter how good the product is, national pride is a stubborn thing. The attack on her was brutal and, honestly, a little bit misogynistic. To call a national icon a traitor just for endorsing a car says less about her, and more about the anxiety permeating Japanese industry. Japanese automakers have been complacent for years. They dominated the hybrid market, but they were slow on EVs. The fear is that BYD will do to Japan's auto industry what Toyota did to the American auto industry in the 1980s, but in reverse. The fear is that the K-car, the last bastion of Japanese automotive independence, will be invaded and conquered by a company that simply wanted it more. The criticism of Alice Hirose was extreme, but underneath it was a very real panic. The Japanese public is watching their automotive giants stumble on battery tech and software, while a Chinese upstart is blitzing them on every metric. The fact that BYD is doing it without relying heavily on subsidies, despite being penalized for using Chinese batteries, makes it even more terrifying for them. The concept of range in the RACCO has a fascinating dual purpose. The 320-kilometer range on the high trim is impressive, but it's also intentionally not overkill. In Japan, the average daily commute is much shorter than in the US. People don't drive from Los Angeles to San Francisco in a K-car. They drive from the suburbs to the train station. They drive to the grocery store. They drive to the local temple. A range of 320 kilometers is more than enough for a week's worth of city errands. BYD understood that throwing a 500-kilometer range at the Japanese consumer would be over-engineering and would raise the price unnecessarily. They dialed it in perfectly to hit the sweet spot of sufficient and inexpensive. That is a sign of mature product thinking. They didn't just throw tech at the wall to see what stuck. They sculpted the car to fit the exact dimensions of Japanese life. The charging speed also deserves a nod. The 50-kilowatt DC fast charging capability means that on a long trip, if you need to top up, you can go from 20% to 80% in about 30 to 40 minutes. This is not class-leading, but it is highly functional for a K car. The real genius is the V2L and V2H integration. The car comes with a power outlet that can supply up to 1.5 kilowatts of electricity. In the event of a power outage, you can hook up your refrigerator, your microwave, or even a portable heater. In Japan, where the emergency preparedness culture is deeply ingrained, this feature alone could be the deciding factor for a family choosing between the RACCO and the Sakura. The Nissan Sakura has a similar feature, but BYD's implementation is more seamless and integrated with the Blade battery's higher safe discharge rate. It's a small detail that speaks volumes about how much research BYD did on the ground. Looking forward, if BYD hits their target of 10,000 orders for the RACCO by the end of 2026, it will send shockwaves through the Japanese auto industry. It will prove that foreign manufacturers can win in the K-car market, which will invite others. We might see Tesla try to build a microcar. We might see Hyundai take a stab at it. The fortress will be breached, and once it's breached, it cannot be sealed again. The Japanese automakers will be forced to compete on price, range, and features, in a segment where they were previously coasting on brand loyalty. This is the magic of disruption. It doesn't just change the market, it changes the behavior of the incumbents. They get faster, leaner, and better, and the consumer wins. There is also a broader geopolitical angle here that deserves some attention. BYD is a Chinese company, and China and Japan have a complicated history. There's a lot of historical baggage, a lot of political tension, and a lot of mutual suspicion. BYD is navigating that minefield with remarkable skill. They're not trying to be in your face about being Chinese. They're not waving flags or making political statements. They're just building a really good car and letting the product do the talking. It's a smart strategy because it allows Japanese consumers to focus on the car itself rather than the politics behind it. The RACCO is not a symbol of Chinese nationalism. It's a symbol of Japanese practicality, built by a Chinese company. That distinction is everything. The response from traditional Japanese automakers has been interesting to watch. There's a lot of quiet talk behind closed doors, but publicly they're trying to project calm. Honda is working on new solid-state battery tech. Nissan is upgrading the Sakura's range for the next iteration, but those upgrades are years away. BYD is shipping cars right now. In the time it takes Honda to develop a better battery, BYD could sell 100,000 RACCOs and build a loyal customer base. The first-mover advantage in this space is crucial, and BYD is exploiting it ruthlessly. They're not waiting for permission. They're not waiting for the perfect moment. They're just moving. The dealer issue is still the elephant in the room. Suzuki has 5,000 dealerships, BYD has 77. That means if a farmer in rural Hokkaido wants to see a RACCO, he might have to drive 3 hours to the nearest city. That is a massive handicap. But BYD is not sitting still. They are partnering with existing auto parts retailers and leveraging the Yanasi network. The Yanasi connection is particularly strategic because it brings prestige. When you walk into a Yanasi showroom, you are used to seeing Mercedes-Benz or BMW. Seeing a BYD there elevates the Chinese brand's status. It removes the cheap Chinese knockoff stigma immediately. The Yanasi president came out and said, "BYD has the world's top performance." That quote is being plastered all over Japanese marketing materials. It is a shield against national pride. If the best luxury dealer in the country is willing to stake their reputation on BYD, then the consumer feels safer taking the plunge. We should also address the cultural appropriation argument that some critics have raised. Some people in Japan have said that BYD is essentially copying the formula of Japanese K cars and just making it electric. That is like saying Apple copied the smartphone because it has a screen and a battery. BYD didn't just copy, they iterated. They improved the range, they improved the door opening mechanism. They added safety features that are optional or absent on competitors. They looked at the K-car formula and asked, what would the perfect version of this look like? And then they built it. That is what innovation looks like. It is standing on the shoulders of giants, not to steal their view, but to see further. The Japanese automakers should be flattered that a global competitor is taking their formula so seriously. And they should be worried that someone else is executing it better. The final thing I want you to consider is the symbolic weight of the name. RACCO, it sounds like raccoon. Raccoons are clever, adaptable creatures that thrive in urban environments. They are survivors. They don't fight with brute force, they outsmart the environment. That is exactly what BYD is doing. They are the raccoons in the Japanese auto industry's back alley, rifling through the garbage, finding the inefficiencies, and building a nest right under the noses of the local cats. The Japanese auto industry has been sleeping in a warm house, sure of its dominance. BYD has just slipped in through the cat flap. The advertising controversy, the subsidy gaps, the dealership wars. These are all just surface waves. The deep current is that BYD has fundamentally understood that the K-car market isn't about cars. It's about lifestyle. It's about the narrow streets. It's about the family with 2 kids and a grocery run. It's about the elderly couple who need a high seating position to get in and out easily. It's about the young professional who wants a clean, quiet, technologically advanced vehicle that fits in their tiny parking box. The RACCO hits every single one of those notes. It does not preach about saving the planet. It does not force futuristic styling on a conservative buyer. It does not say, look how cool I am. It says, look how helpful I am. That is the ultimate marketing magic. And that patience that BYD is showing, it's truly remarkable. They entered the Japanese market in 2023 with SUVs that didn't sell well. They took the feedback. They didn't get discouraged. They went back to the drawing board and built a bespoke vehicle for the market that rejected them. That kind of strategic patience is rare in the corporate world. Most companies want immediate returns. BYD is playing a 30-year game. They are thinking about the generation that is currently in elementary school. When those kids grow up, they might not have the same nationalistic biases as their parents. They might see BYD as just another tech company, like Sony or Apple. BYD is investing in that future. In the short term, the RACCO faces massive headwinds. The subsidies are against them, the dealer network is weak, the cultural resistance is fierce. But in the long term, the product is so good that it will inevitably win over early adopters. Those early adopters will become evangelists. They will tell their friends, "I got a cheap EV that drives like a dream and parks anywhere." Word of mouth is the only advertising that truly matters in a closed society like Japan. And once the word of mouth starts, the wall crumbles. So what do I think happens? I think BYD is going to hit their 10,000 order target. I think they will rattle the cage so hard that Suzuki and Honda will have to release their next-gen EVs earlier than planned, probably at a lower margin than they wanted. I think the Japanese government might even have to revisit the subsidy rules to avoid the appearance of outright protectionism. And by the end of the decade, I believe we will see Chinese cars as a permanent fixture on Japanese roads. It won't be a flood, but it will be a steady, undeniable presence. The era of the Japanese fortress is ending. Not with a bang, but with the quiet hum of an electric motor sliding open its doors. And to bring it back to the home turf, this should terrify and excite the American auto industry. Terrify, because if BYD can adapt to Japan, they can adapt to the US. Excite, because competition breeds excellence. The same way Japanese automakers forced Detroit to get better in the 80s, Chinese automakers will force everyone to get better now. We are living through the most exciting period in automotive history since the invention of the Model T. The electric revolution is the new frontier, and BYD just planted a very large flag on a very difficult hill. Now I want to leave you with a question, and I want you to actually think about this, because it's going to determine how you watch the next few years of this industry unfold. If BYD can pull this off in Japan, if they can crack the most closed-off market on Earth using a $12,000 car, built by a former Nissan engineer who defected to the other side, then what's to stop them from doing the same thing everywhere else? The subsidies aren't going to last forever. The tariffs are going to come down eventually. The culture is going to shift. And when it does, the global automotive industry will never look the same. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think BYD is going to win in Japan? Or is this just a PR stunt that's going to fizzle out in a year? I want to see you fight it out in the comments because this is a debate worth having. And if you want to see more deep dives into how Chinese EVs are reshaping the global auto industry, hit that subscribe button. Because we are just getting started. The RACCO is just the beginning, and the moves are getting bolder,